Many people know school boards exist, but they may not fully understand the role that a school board plays.
The school board is all around governance. We kind of govern the school district, not so much into the day-to-day operations of the district. So we're kind of the bridge between the community and the school system. The biggest lesson that I've learned in this space is that no one person, organization can do this alone. This is a system approach to serve young people and to make sure that their needs are met.
Today we're joined by Dr. Jermaine Kennedy.
Dr. Kennedy serves as Chief Program Officer for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Ohio.
He oversees youth strategy, program development, workforce readiness initiatives, and community partnerships.
He also serves as an elected member of the Columbus City School Board of Education, helping guide the largest school district in the state of Ohio.
At the end of the day, it really requires various organizations and sectors coming together to piece together the work to ensure that students are successful. Young person's life doesn't happen in a silo, and so the supports can't happen in a silo either.
What continues to motivate you to stay in this work?
I was that young person. I was expelled from high school. Not because I was a bad kid, it was just some choices that weren't the best choices. And there was some mentors that really started to lean in, kind of help me see a clearer path, and they challenged me and they supported me. Every young person deserves a chance to write a better story, a bigger story than what they may have thought was possible.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Gina Watts here alongside the wise, the winsome, Mr. Andrew McPeak.
Wise and winsome. Wow. That's a good way to kick this off. Gina, thanks so much. Listeners, we're so glad that you have joined us today. I'm so happy to be here.
That's right, friends. So if you believe that schools should be more than just essays and GPAs, if you believe that EQs are just as important as IQs, and if you expect amazing things from the next generation, then you are in the right place, because we believe that too.
Absolutely. And this summer, if you've been following us on School on a Mission, we're highlighting incredible people and organizations who are helping students thrive beyond the traditional classroom. We're exploring the student success ecosystem. How about that, Gina Watts? And celebrating many people, programs, partnerships, all the amazing things that contribute to the well-being and success of students.
And today we're focusing on a role that often works behind the scenes, but has tremendous influence on the lives of students and families, educators and communities. That's school board leadership.
Absolutely. But before we dive in, Gina, we've got to get to our question of the day. It is like normal. It's a good one. Are you ready for a good question, Gina?
I am indeed.
Okay, here it is. What is a role in school that most students probably don't think much about, but it has a bigger impact than people realize?
I love this question. I always love our questions. I love this question, but I feel like no matter how we answer it, somebody's going to get mad at us. Because they're going to be like,
why not me?
Yeah, exactly. So for everybody that's listening and you're going to be like, how dare they overlook that role? Forgive us, because we have a list of roles that we probably would want to give attention to. But for me, I think it would be, when I think back on my time in school, the gentlemen and women that I probably had the most time with were our maintenance teams, like our janitorial staff. They just were people who, and I guess let me say, maybe like the maintenance teams, janitorial staff, and like security guards. Like I just always was in community with them. I'm grateful my parents always taught me to see everyone. And so not only did I see them, they saw me. And so there was a gentleman in high school, Mr. Pete. My friends back home in Pennsylvania, y'all remember Mr. Pete. And he just was this like very tall, big man, and he just walked around with authority, but he was the most gentle soul and loved on people. And As you guys know, I became pregnant my senior year, and he loved on me. He loved on me so much, and so did Miss Bev, who, was also one of our security guards, and she became a school board member as well. And they just were the ones that took care of me, and checked on me and saw how I was doing. So, yeah, that's who I think of. And that
I love
honestly
that.
still follows me today. Everywhere I've worked, I've always been closest with that part of our community.
Mm.
So, yeah, how about you?
Well, I love this question because these are often the hidden members of the community, but they're there just for as big of a missional reason as everybody
Oh,
else,
yeah,
right?
uh-huh.
And so the people who came to my mind when I was growing up were the front office ladies. And I'm
Yes.
sure there's some gentlemen out there, but they seem to be mostly ladies, right?
Yeah.
And what I love so much about them is those folks, even though their jobs weren't quote unquote student facing, right? They were community facing, they were parent facing, they were staff facing. But here's the reality is they were also student facing, right?
Yeah.
Their attitude and their approach shaped the culture of the school. So, like, if you got to go into the office in the morning and request something or sign something or do whatever, and you walk in and it's high energy, it's
Mhm.
joy filled, it's attention that you're getting, it's on mission. If you're getting that, then you go into your classroom, you're bringing that thing that you just picked up with you,
Yeah.
and that emotion sort of spreads throughout the whole space. And so those, I, as a kid, was in schools where those front office women set a really great tone and other ones where they set not so great of a tone. And no matter what they chose, it affected the rest of the school, whether or not we acknowledged it. So the same thing's true with the custodial staff and the maintenance
Yeah.
staff that you were just talking about, is those folks who seem to have, at least on paper, a background role, actually had very much a foreground role in terms of how they shape the culture of the school.
And it's so funny. I don't know. I'm a nerd that remembers names like that. And I'm not going to put you on the spot to remember yours, but elementary, Mrs. Plebin, middle school, I can't remember her last name, but her first name was Michelle, and high school was Liz. And those three ladies, yep.
Look at you go.
Because
Look at
that's who
you
we
go.
remember, right? We
Yeah.
remember those people who had an impact on our lives. So, yeah, that was great, Andrew. Thank you for sharing. It's incredible to think about like how each of those roles contribute to a student's journey beyond the teacher in the classroom, beyond the administrator in the building. It takes a community effort. And even beyond the building or the district, we have leaders outside of that. And today's guest is an example. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jermaine Kennedy. And Dr. Kennedy serves as Chief Program Officer for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Ohio. He oversees youth strategy, program development, workforce readiness initiatives, and community partnerships. He also serves as an elected member of the Columbus City School Board of Education, helping guide the largest school district in the state of Ohio.
Dr. Kennedy brings more than 2 decades of experience across education, youth development, nonprofit leadership, and public service. Throughout his career, he served students and families through organizations including Homeless Families Foundation, the Ohio Department of Education, and now both the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Ohio, as well as Columbus City Schools. He holds a doctorate in educational administration, a master's in education, and a bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University. More importantly, though, he spent his entire career advocating for young people and helping create opportunities for students to succeed. And that is why he is here. So, Dr. Kennedy, we are honored, absolutely honored to have you with us today. Thanks so much for joining School on a Mission.
Yes, thanks for having me, Andrew and Gina. It's a pleasure.
Well, Dr. Kennedy, here's where we want you to start. You serve in a lot of different roles, but we want to zero in today on the school board role, especially because we know that that's a role that a lot of people don't fully understand, right? Many people know school boards exist, but they may not fully understand the role that a school board plays. So from your perspective, what is the responsibility of a school board? And why do you feel like that work matters for those individual students in individual schools all over the community?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's very nuanced. And to your point, like a lot of folks don't know exactly what the school board does. And in a certain instance, I'm still learning as well. But primarily, the school board is all around governance, right? Like we kind of govern the school district, not so much into the day to day operations of the district, but establishing vision, establishing priorities, adopting a lot of policies, right? Approving budgets, and just kind of holding the system accountable. And the structure is you have the superintendent, then you have the treasurer, then you have the auditors. So those three roles are kind of the school board's direct reports, right? And so at best, the school board is held accountable to the community, right? And so we're kind of the bridge between the community and the school system, and responsible for really asking some of those questions and decisions around student learning, whether resources are being allocated equitably, from just preparing young people for success beyond graduation, right? And I think that word matters because the school board, all of that work eventually touches young people, right? And the students, as it relates to transportation, curriculum, facilities. And we're dealing with a lot of facility situations now. But student supports and again, just the decisions that are that help shape the school system.
Thank you. I think oftentimes we might get to it later. It's even having that kind of even, I guess, minimal awareness of how a school board works. And also that pointing back to why it's important to vote, why it's important to show up, because especially in elected situations where folks aren't appointed, they're elected, we
Hmm.
really have the ability to have a say, right? And who represents us in our community. You've been with students in classrooms and nonprofits, state education systems, and now serving as a school board member. Given that like broad perspective, what have you learned about the many different people and organizations that contribute to student success? I know it's a pretty big question, but even if you can narrow it down to like, what are some things that stand out to you of how we might all work together for the overall good of our next generation? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the last part of that question, right? I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in this space is that no one person, organization, uh, can do this alone, right? This is a system approach to serve young people and to make sure that their needs are met. There's a lot of terms around, collective impact, partnerships, ecosystems, but it's at the end of the day, it really requires various organizations and sectors coming together to piece together the work to ensure that students are successful, right? But young person's life doesn't happen in a silo, and so the supports can't happen in a silo either, right? It takes strong uh, partnerships with schools, families, community organizations, businesses, faith communities, right? That ensure meaningful outcomes are happening for students and families and communities, right? And so for me, that's the biggest lesson, and that's the thread from being in a classroom, to being in the district, to running in a nonprofit, the State Department, the school board. That thread is collective impact, right?
So good, so good. As we talk about, because what we're all about here on this podcast is thinking about all of the things that are surrounding a student that are helping them become the best version of themselves, especially those folks like you who see their role as more than just a job, but see it as a mission, right? A
Mhm.
goal that they're working towards and change that they're trying to create. So one of the themes of this series has been that helping students thrive takes an entire ecosystem of support. And so I guess I'm curious, and you may have already started down the track of this answer, but where do you see school boards fitting into that ecosystem, right? So you talked about how programs don't happen in a silo. You talked about accountability as a key role that boards serve. But what is like the primary roles? Maybe if you want to dig deeper in that, or want to expand on into other categories. But what are some of the primary roles that boards play in strengthening the connections between schools and families and communities, as you started talking about?
Yeah, yeah. I think the school boards they really steward, right, the ecosystem, because the school district touches so many students and families, right? School boards are uniquely positioned to convene partners and help remove barriers and create conditions for that type of collaboration needed, right? We certainly can help ensure schools are not operating in isolation, but are connected to broader networks and organization and resources. Uh, and the reality is, many of the challenges that students face uh, extend beyond academics, right? Extend beyond the classroom. Issues like mental health and housing instability, transportation, workforce readiness. Access to enrichment opportunities. They require community-wide solutions, and so school boards can help strengthen those connections and foster some of those partnerships. By listening to community voice, right? That's a big component, and making sure that the schools are connected to those assets that are already exist throughout the community. Though we can't ultimately make the decisions from the school standpoint, we can create the conditions for that success to be possible.
If you don't mind if I ask a follow-up, because I really love the concept, all the concepts that you were talking about. And earlier when you were talking about accountability, it got me thinking, obviously you're holding the school system accountable to the community, but you really talked about it both ways. So in what ways does the school board help hold the community accountable to be a part of what's going on in the school system? Does that happen as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And so right now we're going through this process called visioning, right? And so visioning is, how do we design our buildings, the design of the buildings to meet the needs of our young people, but also the programming that's going to take place in the buildings, right? And so for example, how are we creating buildings that have access for partners to be embedded in those spaces as well? And so part of that visioning process required us to have some town halls in the community, asking the community, what do they want to see? How do they want this to look? We need you to have voice in this if in order to create the school system that you want to see, that you elected us to ensure is possible, right? So we have to hold the community accountable in that way by ensuring that those conditions are present for them to have voice and create voice for them in this whole process. When things, when we need them to step out for, of course, levies is a kind of the big one, right? And just support various initiatives as it relates to kind of state legislation and policy at the state house, right? We have to hold, or we are holding them accountable to understand the political process and why some of these decisions that are happening at the state house is impacting our budget. So we need you to come down there and show your voice and share your voice, because again, this is a collective initiative. Like it's not just on the school, it's just not on the teachers and the principals and the superintendent. It requires the community voice in all of this. Even if you don't have kids still in a district, or your kids are in a different district, right? Young people need the supports and resources across the city.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. We're going to take just a quick, brief commercial break. Friends, today's conversation reminds us that leadership matters at every level of education.
One way that we support leadership development is through the iLead curriculum, our values-based K-12 leadership curriculum. Using iLead equips students with the character, confidence, and critical life skills needed to thrive in school and beyond.
You might not have known this, but you can try iLead for free. It's a simple process and a great way to explore how leadership development can support the students you serve. And we don't just limit our support and services to students. Matter of fact, Growing Leaders also provides training and resources to support teachers, teacher leaders, parents, and communities. From free to fee, we find the best way to walk with you and your team and your community to create transformational leaders who lead themselves and each other for good.
Be sure to check the links in our show notes to learn more about iLead, access additional resources, book a speaker for training and development, or to schedule a discovery call with a member of the Growing Leaders team, which could, of course, include me or Gina.
We'd love to connect with you. Now, let's jump back to our conversation with Dr. Kennedy. All right, Dr. Kennedy, you've advocated for issues like student equity and educator retention and also family engagement. When you think about the future of education, can you talk to us about some of the opportunities that give you hope?
A couple things, really. But I think we as a society are recognizing that education is about the whole child, right? And we're seeing schools and nonprofits in the business community really come together around that common thread. Uh, bef- well before when I started my career, it was not this level of partnership and collaboration, right? And so there's a growing understanding around academics, mental health, workforce, belonging, that definitely encourages me. And I'm also encouraged by uh, the young people themselves, right? We're coming out of the graduation season, and I had the opportunity to keynote one of the graduations. And the thing that I shared was don't confuse success with significance, right? Like success is about what you accomplish. Significance is about who benefits because you were here, right? And I think the young people we have right now, they are leaning into that. Like, how can we create a better environment for everyone, right? And they're really uh, uh, real advocates for change. And so that certainly gives me inspires me and a lot of hope, and knowing that a lot of the talent that we already have, the beliefs, resources, and passion, right? They're already in the community, and it's just really around how do we just align everything. And so that certainly gives me hope in creating a different way we operate as a community, as a school district, as nonprofit leaders.
So good. So good. Well, we've only got a couple questions left for you. I want to ask another kind of interesting question. You've given us some really helpful information about school boards, but I'm sure many of the people listening, although their roles as educators are affected by school boards, they might have never actually attended a school board meeting or sat down and talked to a member of the school board in order to kind of fully understand the impact of the work that you guys do. So when you think about the people who are on school boards, first of all, if you could humanize them for us a little bit, right? Because often, they're political fodder, but we don't really get to know the people. So talk about who the people are that are serving on school boards, and how do you guys see your role in helping students succeed? Like, what's kind of the human element there?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a really, really good question. But school board members, at the end of the day, really, it is a political space for sure. And a lot of the school board members don't get in it for the political reasons. A lot of them are just parents, right? Grandparents, educators, business leaders, nonprofit professionals, your neighbors that care deeply about public education, right? And so every decision, we may not agree on every decision that's made, right? For the most part, I think most school board members are absurd because they generally want the best outcomes for young people, right? And I also wish that the public, right, really understood the complexity of the work. School boards, they're often balancing competing priorities, limited resources, a lot of legal requirements, right? And so that back office of the nuance of the work that a lot of the public doesn't really see and understand, it can cause some that misunderstanding of what are you doing and how come you can't just do X, Y, and Z, right? So rarely are the solutions simple on the school board. There are a lot of kind of competing priorities, but at the end of the day, right? I think effective school boards are focused on just one question, right? How are we creating conditions for students to succeed? And I think through that lens is which every decision should be made. And I think for the most part, it is made through that lens.
Andrew and I looked at each other through the screen because you were talking about moving from success to significance. And our friend, Dr. John Maxwell, writes a lot about that, and has helped both of us also lean into what it means to live lives of significance. So grateful that you were able to share that message with students at the age that they are, because how many of us don't learn that until later in life?
Same.
You've dedicated your career to young people in so many different ways through so many different avenues. And we've spent this conversation primarily talking about the work you do through the school board, but we know that you've spent decades leading and serving as a nonprofit executive, and in particular in the out of school time program area. I would love if you would just take a minute or two. I know this wasn't a planned question, but I wanted to make sure that we gave you space to talk about, what are things that you're seeing in out of school time areas? Maybe it's even ways that community members can be more intentional to support out of school time programs. I think a lot of times, just like we have limited awareness about how school boards work and their importance to serving the next generation, I think sometimes we overlook the importance of, OST programs who partner with schools or partner with K through 12 organizations to make sure our next generation has what they need. Do you mind spending a brief moment on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Out of school time, I started my career in the classroom and made a conscious decision to move to the out of school time space, right? Understanding that all of a lot of the success and barriers that were in the school system itself, right? We need that out of school time kind of wraparound support to ensure that success remains in the school district, right? And so that time from 3 to 7 is a critical time for young people, right? And so having that space, creating spaces for young people to come to feel a sense of belonging, right? A sense of community, an opportunity to participate in other enrichment activities. Unfortunately, again, the barrier of the school is you only have a certain amount of time. We have a certain amount of standards, the things that we have to get done. And a lot of the enrichment portion, teachers can't do that, right? And so that out of school time is critical in just exposing young people to just a myriad of opportunities, right? And a lot of it for me revolves around, career workforce readiness. How are we creating spaces, not just for high school students, but how are we exposing our young people to various careers, opportunities, but not in so much as this the job I want, but reframing it, what type of problems do you want to solve, right?
Yeah,
The type of
that's
problems
good.
that you want to solve in the community, then we can now expose them to various careers, sectors that focus on that, right? And so for me, it's a critical piece because we know, given, a lot of our families have to, work 2 or 3 jobs. There isn't a lot of supervision outside of school for a myriad of reasons, and note that those out of school time organizations provide, again, just critical enrichment, critical development, self-development, exposure to opportunities, and that young people can kind of reach their potential. And so it's needed to the point where we are advocating for a lot of legislation for the out of school time programming to be, line items in state budgets and city budgets, because we know it supports youth violence, right? It supports reducing youth violence. It supports various, again, workforce readiness, the sports, and just a myriad of ways that, again, young people can reach their potential.
Yeah. Before I'm going to ask you one more question before we wrap up. One of the things, just as you were sharing, I was just thinking about all the hats you wear and all the work that you say yes to. And on behalf of a resident of the city of Columbus, I just thank you. I thank you that you care so much, that you show up so much, that you take on so much, because our young people and our families and our community need more advocates like you, to share the load, right? To share the load, to put it on your back, and advocate for all of us. As you think about the next generation, and for all of us investing in the next generation, what continues to motivate you to stay in this work? Because I know there are good days, but I'm
None.
sure there's some days where you're like, career, calling, can they feel good together all the time? So if you would close us out with what keeps you motivated to stay in this work?
Yeah, I think I stay in this work because two things really. I know what can happen when someone believes in a young person, when they don't really fully believe in themselves yet. Because I was that young person all through elementary, all the way to my high school, my sophomore year of high school, right? I was expelled from high school. And not because I was necessarily a bad kid, it was just some choices that weren't the best choices. And it was some mentors that really started to lean in and kind of help me see a clearer path. And they challenged me and they supported me and refused to let me let difficult situations define my story. And it's that, I carry that with me to today. Like I'm always reminded of that experience. And so anytime I meet young people that are struggling or disengaged or kind of questioning things, like I remember what positive adult relationships can do for young people as in terms of mentorship and support. And I think that is what motivates me, right? To stay in this type of work, right? Because I know the possibility. They say a non-judgmental and a non-parental adult in a young person's life, it yields X amount of resilience in them, right? And so knowing that just being able to pour into a young person, giving them some guidance, again, can help shift the trajectory of not only that young person, but the world, really, right? And so if my story proves anything, is that the setbacks, doesn't have to become the destination. And so I want more young people, all young people really, to understand that's possible, right? And so that's why I do this work, because I think every young person deserves a chance, right, to write a better story, a bigger story than what they may have thought was possible.
And Dr. Kennedy, I think I can speak for Gina and say, we think you're a real one, man. All the stuff that you're doing.
I appreciate it.
So this has been a really helpful conversation, but it's honestly just been really good to get to know you as well and hear your heart for the work that you're doing. And I think that represents not only your community, but also school boards everywhere. To me, I think you've helped pull back the curtain a little bit on a role that a lot of us see, but don't really fully understand what it's like to have it. So thank you for that.
Yes, today's conversation reminds us that, helping students thrive requires leadership at every level, right? It takes educators and family, community organizations, youth serving agencies, school boards. It requires all of us to work together on behalf of the students. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
Absolutely. And friends, with that, what time it is. It is time for our final segment, DMI. DMI, of course, stands for Don't Miss It. So Gina and I, because we're nerds, have been taking notes the whole time as we're learning. And we both highlight one thing from today's conversation that we don't think you should miss.
So, Andrew, I hesitate to let you go first, but I shall. What is your DMI for today?
The thing that I came back to, just because I think about this subject a lot, but is that word accountability that Dr. Kennedy used pretty much towards the beginning, and helping me think about it. Obviously, I knew that school boards hold schools accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I hadn't thought of was the bi-directional relationship of that accountability, that the community needs the school board to hold the school accountable, but also the school needs the school board to hold the community accountable, and that symbiotic relationship can only be healthy when accountability is present. And so I ended up writing this statement. It feels like the school board is where the mission of the school meets the realities of the community, right? So if everybody was doing what they needed to do at all times, the school board probably wouldn't even be necessary, right? But there are so many factors that mean we have to constantly be playing with the variables in order to make sure that we're accomplishing the mission. So he talked about all kinds of things, from like unforeseen challenges, like Gina, you and I know about a school district that just had their gym catch on fire because lightning struck it, right?
Yep.
That's an unforeseen, nobody planned for or budgeted for that kind of thing to happen. There's bad players, could be in lots of different places. There's underperformance, could happen in lots of different places. And of course, changing landscapes, whether they're political or financial or whatever the situation is. And so it feels like the school board is really standing in that gap and going, hey, we would love it if we could just let everybody just do the mission. But the reality is that mission meets reality sometimes, and those two things clash. And we got to manipulate some of those variables in order to make sure that the mission still gets accomplished. I feel like I have a much better understanding of, like, even philosophically what the role is that school boards play. So I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, that was so good. And it was so not what's the word I want to use? It wasn't influenced by maybe how you've seen school boards operate, Dr. Kennedy. It was shaped by the way that they should operate and how
Yes.
you yourself are showing up in that way. Because sometimes we have our own understanding of how a school board or how a thing should be, and then we show up in that way, and maybe even continue generational bad decisions. Do you know what I mean? So um one of the things, okay, so for me, my DMI is one of our show producer, Nikki. She actually is a great example of somebody that's kind of behind the scenes making everything work. Maybe not the person who you always recognize as being a part of a thing, but is essential to the thing working. How we started off with our question of the day. She has said for years that she decided to go into serving young people and serving the next generation because she wanted to be who she needed when she grew up. And Dr. Kennedy, your life is an example of that. Just authentically how you shared with us at the end of, like, you were a student who was expelled, and you weren't a bad kid, but you were a young person who life was changed, direction of life was changed by somebody who cared enough to be the person that they knew you needed. In some way, shape, or form in their soul, they felt like, I need to walk with this young man. And whoever those people were, we thank them, because so many more young people are now transformed by your leadership and the work that you do, because somebody said yes to you. And so, yeah, I hope that as people hear that, you don't just hear that as, oh, that's his story. That actually could be your story. There's so many young people that need us, and we come up with reasons of why we don't have to, or we don't need to show up. And they're just waiting for us to say yes. So thank you for being an example of that. Dr. Kennedy, we are so grateful for you for joining us today and for the many ways you continue to advocate for students, families, and the communities across Central Ohio.
Absolutely. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Awesome. All right, listeners. So before you step off of this podcast and go on to the next one, we want to say, first of all, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of School on a Mission podcast. And before you hit skip, we've got a little challenge for you. You already know what's coming. We want you to grab a pen, a notebook, a sticky note, the back of your hand, whatever it is, and write down one action you're going to take this week as a result of this conversation. Maybe it's something you're going to do, something you're going to investigate further, something you're going to read more about. Maybe it's a person, i.e. your local school board member, who you might need to sit down with and get to know a little bit better. So whatever it is, write it down. Got it? Perfect. Now DM us with your action step. We cannot wait to see the amazing things that you're up to.
And don't forget to check out iLead and the additional resources we've included in today's show notes.
Absolutely. All right, folks, until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep leading your school on a mission.